She smiled softly, twirling her wine glass, and calmly confessed she'd sold the cabin my grandfather built with his own hands. In that instant, something inside me shattered, and what I chose to do next would leave her world in silent ruins. I had believed love was the steady flame that keeps us safe, but that evening it burned down to ashes in front of me. How far can a heart fall before it turns cold, calculating, and ready to fight fire with ice? In the quiet aftermath, I would come to learn that revenge isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it whispers, carefully dismantling everything built upon lies. The restaurant was precisely as Vanessa had described, a small, intimate space nestled into the snowy heart of Vale, a hushed oasis bathed in the amber glow of candlelight. Ethan had arrived earlier that evening, carefully polished shoes crunching softly across fresh snow, his breath forming pale clouds beneath the low-hanging stars. He'd carried with him a sense of cautious hope, meticulously crafted like the gentle knot in his silk tie, elegant, yet undeniably fragile. Vanessa arrived slightly late, as was her custom, sweeping into the dimly lit restaurant on a gentle gust of cold air. Her long dark hair caught the candlelight as she removed her coat, revealing a simple black dress he had given her on their 5th anniversary. The dress still fit her perfectly, emphasizing the grace he had always admired. She kissed him briefly, smiling as if there was nothing else to say, before sliding elegantly into the seat opposite his. Vanessa arrived slightly late, as was her custom, sweeping into the dimly lit restaurant on a gentle gust of cold air. Her long dark hair caught the candlelight as she removed her coat, revealing a simple black dress he had given her on their 5th anniversary. The dress still fit her perfectly, emphasizing the grace he had always admired. She kissed him briefly, smiling as if there was nothing else to say, before sliding elegantly into the seat opposite his. As the waiter poured their wine, Ethan quietly studied her. She had always been striking, a woman of effortless poise and composure. Yet tonight something felt subtly different. An unfamiliar shadow danced behind her eyes, a restless tension in the elegant curve of her lips. The atmosphere itself seemed somehow charged, as if the room held its breath, waiting for something invisible but inevitable. 10 years, Vanessa mused softly, swirling the burgundy liquid in her glass. Can you believe it? Sometimes, Ethan replied carefully. Other times, I still wake up amazed. She smiled, but the warmth in it never quite reached her eyes. The waiter returned, placing their dinner carefully upon the white linen tablecloth. Vanessa's plate held a delicate seared salmon, garnished with sprigs of dill. Ethan's eyes lingered briefly on his own dish, perfectly cooked filet mignon, the aroma rich and inviting. Yet, an odd uneasiness filled his chest, as though the fragrance had suddenly become a burden rather than a pleasure. They spoke gently, carefully avoiding the unseen edges that often appeared in their conversations. She mentioned her yoga classes and the boutique she'd recently discovered in town, small talk filling the silence between measured sips of wine. Ethan listened quietly, a tightness growing slowly in his chest as the meal progressed, an unease he could neither name nor escape. Then, as the waiter cleared away their plates, Vanessa leaned back slightly, her eyes flickering briefly downward. "There's something I need to tell you," she said softly, her voice calm but strange, like the thin layer of ice that forms quietly on water overnight. Ethan felt his breath catch, not sure why, as a quiet alarm rose from somewhere deep inside. "Go on," he urged softly, forcing a steadiness he didn't feel. She hesitated only a moment, as if carefully choosing the sharpest knife from a drawer filled with duller blades. "You remember the cabin your grandfather built, the one near the lake?" Something inside Ethan tightened sharply, but outwardly, he simply nodded, keeping his voice gentle. "Of course, I remember it. My grandfather spent years building that place. We spent every summer there when I was a kid." Vanessa's expression flickered, almost regretfully, before settling into careful neutrality. "I sold it," she confessed, the words simple yet as sharp as polished glass. "We needed the money for Darius." The room seemed to fade to muted colors, the sounds of clinking glasses and whispered conversations dissolving into an indistinct hum. Ethan sat utterly still, feeling his heart quietly splinter inside his chest. He had known of Darius, her friend, her confidant, the man whose struggling wellness startup she'd casually mentioned more than once. But never had he imagined that this distant, meaningless project might threaten something so sacred. The cabin had been a part of Ethan's soul, a quiet sanctuary woven through his childhood memories. He vividly remembered mornings spent on its weathered porch, sunlight filtering gently through the ancient trees, his grandfather's deep, comforting laugh as they sat fishing at the lake's edge. Selling it was an act beyond mere betrayal. It was the erasure of his family's legacy, casually executed without a word of consultation. He stared at Vanessa, searching her carefully maintained expression for any trace of remorse, and found none. In that moment, he understood. Her betrayal wasn't impulsive, it was deliberate and calculated, the sum of countless silent decisions made without him. A quiet chill seeped into his bones, a deeper cold than any he'd ever felt before. "Ethan?" Vanessa's voice pierced his reverie gently, carrying a hint of irritation masked as concern. "Say something." He opened his mouth, yet no words came. He saw himself clearly then, seated in a restaurant, impeccably dressed, yet suddenly reduced to nothing but ash. There was no outrage, no angry accusation he could summon. Instead, a silent emptiness filled him, cold and absolute. He knew no words could restore what she'd stolen, nor erase the act of betrayal she had so casually committed. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan rose from the table. Vanessa's eyes widened slightly in surprise, perhaps expecting anger, bitterness, or some form of emotional retaliation. But Ethan merely retrieved his coat from the back of his chair, quietly fastening its buttons. He left his half-empty glass of wine and untouched dessert behind, feeling her eyes follow him every step as he walked calmly, gracefully, out into the night. Outside, the cold mountain air struck him sharply, bringing a fresh clarity. Ethan drew a slow, ragged breath, feeling the crushing weight of solitude close around him. Snowflakes drifted silently downward, catching in his hair and melting against his burning skin. He stood quietly beneath the starlit sky, surrounded by snow and silence, feeling utterly alone and yet strangely free, as if the truth, however painful, had finally released him. For a moment, he turned his face toward the distant mountains, knowing somewhere in the darkness lay the ruins of his grandfather's dreams, now just another casualty of Vanessa's ruthless pursuit. He understood now, more clearly than ever, that love was fragile, trust a delicate thread easily severed by a careless hand. Standing there beneath an indifferent sky, Ethan embraced the quiet devastation of his heart. He did not scream or rage. Instead, he silently accepted this pain, allowing it to reshape him into something sharper, more resilient. As snow settled softly around his feet, Ethan took a step forward, away from the ashes of everything he had known, and toward an uncertain future. The snow beneath Ethan's feet crunched softly as he navigated the deserted street, each step measured and deliberate, the rhythm of his heartbeat carefully matching the steady tempo of his shoes against the frozen pavement. Vale was eerily quiet that evening, the softly falling snow blanketing streets that usually echoed with laughter and distant music. The town's silence seemed to reflect Ethan's own internal stillness, a calm he clung to desperately, knowing it was the only thing preventing his collapse. He paused at the edge of a small park, under a circle of pale yellow light cast by an old-fashioned street lamp. Snowflakes settled gently on the lapels of his coat, tiny and fleeting reminders of the cold reality he'd just faced. Ethan withdrew his phone from his pocket, the sleek device cold in his palm, and typed a brief message to Sam. "Can we talk? It's important." Sam's reply was immediate, characteristically concise. "Of course. Call anytime." Ethan moved further into the park, away from the street lamp's glow, seeking a deeper, more comforting darkness. His breath clouded gently in front of him as he dialed, fingers stiff from the cold and lingering shock. The ringing lasted just a few seconds before Sam's steady voice cut through. "Ethan? What's wrong?" Ethan exhaled slowly, watching his breath blend with the falling snow. "Vanessa sold the cabin. She used the money to support Darius's business." Sam's silence stretched for a heartbeat too long. Carrying all the weight of disbelief and quiet fury Ethan himself refused to express openly. "How long have you known?" Sam asked finally, his voice controlled yet betraying the protective anger Ethan had anticipated. "She told me tonight. Over dinner, casually, as if it was nothing more than another anecdote." A brief pause hung in the air. When Sam spoke again, there was a different quality to his voice. Calmer, strategic. "Have you confronted her?" "No," Ethan replied firmly. "She expects that. She's counting on it. I need something different." "What do you have in mind?" Sam's tone had already shifted from shock to cautious curiosity, trusting Ethan's innate composure, his ability to navigate even the most treacherous waters without losing himself. Ethan paused, breathing the crisp mountain air deeply, letting the frigid temperature sharpen his thoughts. "She thinks I'm oblivious," he murmured, more to himself than to Sam. "She doesn't realize that I've watched her quietly for months, noticing small inconsistencies, odd withdrawals, late nights she never bothered explaining. Tonight, I felt anger, but beneath it was something deeper, resolve. She's been playing games behind my back, but I've been quietly preparing myself. I just didn't know exactly for what until tonight." The snow intensified slightly, flakes becoming larger, bolder, their slow descent mesmerizing. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, feeling a surge of clarity pass through him like electricity. When he opened them again, his voice was steadier, colder, somehow older. 2 months ago, I quietly moved the joint accounts into a private trust. Everything substantial, everything liquid is now secure. It's already done." Sam exhaled sharply, a sound of quiet amazement rather than shock. "You anticipated something like this?" Ethan nodded into the darkness, the gesture unseen but felt profoundly within himself. Not this exactly, but something. It felt inevitable. Sam remained silent again, this time thoughtfully so. Ethan imagined him sitting at his desk, probably leaning forward, elbows propped on polished mahogany, fingers tinted in front of his mouth as he always did when strategizing. "What do you want to do next?" Sam finally asked, respect evident in the simplicity of his words. "Nothing," Ethan replied quietly, decisively. "For now, nothing. I want her to feel secure in her deception, confident she's won. She's waiting for me to explode, to lash out emotionally, giving her a reason to justify everything she's done. But I won't give her that satisfaction. Let her sit in her illusion. The financial truth is already settled, and soon enough she'll understand what that means." A sigh of acknowledgement escaped Sam. Patience is your best weapon right now. The hardest part of winning this battle is standing still and allowing your silence to work for you. "I know," Ethan murmured softly, feeling a flicker of gratitude. "I can't thank you enough, Sam." "You don't have to," Sam replied firmly. "You do the same." Ending the call, Ethan slipped the phone back into his pocket, letting the night and snow reclaim the silence. He stood still a moment longer, inhaling the chilled air, letting his emotions fade into clarity. The pain had not vanished, but beneath it lay a cool determination, sharper and more precise than anger. Ethan understood clearly now that the true battle wasn't about the money or even the cabin. It was about integrity, dignity, and the silent but indomitable strength he had always carried inside. Finally, he withdrew the phone again and typed a simple, direct message to Vanessa, knowing it would shatter her illusion of control without giving her an immediate way to react. "I moved the money 2 months ago. I know everything. Sleep well." He stared briefly at the screen, the text starkly illuminated against the night. His thumb hovered over the send button only briefly, a silent hesitation acknowledging the weight of what he was about to unleash. Then, calmly, without anger, without regret, he pressed send. Across town, he imagined Vanessa still seated in that restaurant, her delicate hand pausing halfway to her glass, the ice cubes floating gracefully in the wine he'd abandoned. He pictured clearly the confusion, then shock, and finally a slow, creeping sense of dread crawling across her carefully crafted composure. The knowledge was not a weapon of vengeance, but rather justice quietly delivered. Ethan adjusted his coat, pulling the collar tighter around his neck, and slowly walked back through the snow-covered streets, feeling a newfound quiet strength within himself. Each step echoed with the steady rhythm of his resolve, reinforced by silence and purpose. The town remained asleep around him, oblivious to the quiet battle now underway. But Ethan knew better. He understood the silent power of patience, the potency of quiet action, and the devastating strength of measured, methodical justice. As he reached his hotel, Ethan paused once more beneath a dim street lamp. The night had deepened, and the snow now blanketed everything in a pristine, silent white, a stark contrast to the storm within Vanessa, whose world he had just quietly turned upside down. Ethan smiled faintly, a subtle, private acknowledgement of the calm victory already settled in his heart. For tonight, he had done enough. Tomorrow would come soon enough, bringing its own storms and battles. But he was ready, quietly prepared, silently strong, utterly and profoundly unshakable. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, a ribbon of dark asphalt threading through an unbroken expanse of snow-covered hills and silent, ghostly forests. Thick snowflakes fell silently, painting the windshield with patterns that the wipers rhythmically cleared, creating a hypnotic dance of clarity and blindness. Inside his car, Ethan was surrounded by the low, comforting hum of the engine and the faint glow of the dashboard lights, his cocoon against the dark uncertainty that lay beyond the glass. He had left Vale shortly after sunrise, abandoning the carefully planned weekend, leaving behind the ghosts of yesterday's confrontation, and moving steadily toward a solitude he both feared and desperately needed. His thoughts came to him in waves, ebbing and flowing between clarity and confusion. The landscape outside mirrored his emotional state, stark yet beautiful, unsettlingly tranquil, cloaked in a deceptive calm. He drove without music or conversation, the silence punctuated only by the sound of snow crunching beneath tires and the soft rhythm of his breath. Occasionally, Ethan caught glimpses of his reflection in the rearview mirror, a face that seemed older now, etched with quiet resignation and the lingering shadow of sleeplessness. He had slept little, tossing in unfamiliar sheets, haunted by Vanessa's calm betrayal. Her face remained clear in his mind, beautiful and devastatingly composed, as she casually confessed to selling his grandfather's cabin, sacrificing his family's past for another man's uncertain future. The steady snowfall grew heavier as he traveled deeper into the mountain roads. Eventually, a soft glow ahead broke through the swirling snow, an unexpected beacon of warmth against the relentless white. A roadside diner appeared, a humble structure adorned with faded neon signs whose lettering blinked sporadically, a symbol of resilience amid solitude. On impulse, Ethan slowed the car, pulling into the parking lot, feeling drawn by its simplicity, the promise of momentary refuge from the cold journey. The diner's interior greeted him with gentle warmth and comforting smells of coffee and frying bacon. The floor tiles, worn and patterned with age, told stories of countless travelers who had found temporary peace within these walls. An elderly waitress, her silver hair neatly tied back, offered Ethan a quiet smile as he slipped into a booth by the window. She placed a laminated menu before him and poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug, the steam curling upwards, dissipating into the warm air. "You look like you've been driving a long time, honey," she remarked gently. Ethan nodded slightly, accepting her compassion without words. He cradled the hot cup between his cold hands, absorbing its comforting heat. Through the diner window, the landscape seemed frozen in timelessness, snow gathering in gentle drifts beneath a low-hanging sky that showed no promise of clearing. As Ethan sipped the bitter coffee, he allowed himself to slow down mentally for the first time since leaving Vale. The quiet of the diner, the murmurs of conversation from the few scattered patrons, and the occasional clink of silverware allowed him the space he'd needed to finally examine what had happened, to look inward and face the pain head-on rather than fleeing from it. He considered the slow erosion of trust that had preceded Vanessa's betrayal, the subtle distance he had overlooked or rationalized. There had been moments, small warnings like quiet tremors preceding an earthquake, her gaze wandering away during conversations, a growing obsession with external validation, secrecy disguised as privacy. These memories emerged now, painful clarity breaking through his previous denial. Vanessa's actions were not impulsive or sudden. They were the culmination of choices made in shadows Ethan had refused to illuminate. Guilt seeped quietly into his heart, mixing uncomfortably with his sense of betrayal. Had he seen the signs clearly and ignored them? Had his love and loyalty clouded his perception to the extent that he willingly overlooked reality? Ethan shook his head slightly, exhaling deeply. He was learning now, painfully, that self-blame was as toxic as bitterness. Both paths led nowhere. Betrayal was not a reflection of the victim, but a window into the betrayer's character. Understanding this, truly accepting it, was the first step toward reclaiming himself. He glanced around the diner, briefly studying the other patrons, an elderly couple sharing quiet conversation over breakfast, a truck driver absorbed in a paperback novel, a young family smiling softly over pancakes. Their lives continued calmly, peacefully unaware of the quiet storm raging within Ethan's mind. He felt strangely comforted by their normalcy, their ordinary humanity, a reminder that life moved forward, always finding ways to heal even the deepest wounds. When the waitress returned, Ethan ordered simply, scrambled eggs, toast, and more coffee. She brought the meal quickly, sensing perhaps his need for silence rather than conversation. As he ate, he thought of his grandfather, the man who had built that cabin plank by plank, who had taught him patience, resilience, the quiet dignity of facing life's storms head-on. What would he say now, knowing what had become of his beloved retreat? Ethan knew the answer instinctively. His grandfather had always chosen to confront disappointment not with rage, but with quiet dignity, strength grounded in character rather than emotion. Ethan resolved to honor that legacy. Finishing his meal, he paid quietly, leaving a generous tip, exchanging only a simple nod with the waitress before stepping back into the cold embrace of the snowfall. His breath fogged immediately, a white mist dissolving into the chilly air. Standing for a moment beside his car, Ethan allowed himself to feel everything: the sorrow, the anger, the quiet resilience emerging from within him. Snow fell softly onto his shoulders, each flake a gentle, silent reminder that even amid pain and loss, beauty still persisted. Ethan climbed back into the warmth of his car, the quiet hum of the engine reigniting like a steady heartbeat. He turned onto the road again, driving steadily through the snowfall, now clearer in purpose and spirit. He knew the journey ahead would still be difficult, filled with moments of darkness and uncertainty. But now he was ready. He had allowed himself to pause, reflect, and accept the truth without bitterness. Ethan understood deeply that healing did not come from avoidance or revenge, but from acceptance, from the quiet courage to move forward despite the storms still to come. As the miles slipped silently behind him, snowflakes continued their graceful descent, covering his tracks, gently erasing the past, and guiding him onward through the solitude, toward whatever waited beyond the horizon, whatever truth awaited discovery, and whatever strength lay hidden within his heart. Denver welcomed Ethan with gray skies, the city skyline shrouded in a low-hanging mist that clung stubbornly to the steel and glass towers. He parked in front of a small cafe nestled quietly between two larger buildings, its window panes fogged from within, soft yellow lights promising warmth amidst the cool, melancholy drizzle. He hesitated before stepping out, gripping the steering wheel tightly, feeling the leather cool and firm beneath his fingers. It was not the cold or the fatigue of the drive that held him frozen. It was doubt, a heavy, lingering uncertainty that had spread like poison since Vanessa's quiet betrayal. If she, someone he had trusted implicitly, could deceive him so effortlessly, how could he trust anyone again? Sam had always been there, a steadfast friend, unassuming but solid. Ethan remembered vividly their shared college days, Sam's easy laugh and straightforward advice, nights spent debating philosophies and dreams over too many cups of coffee. Yet now, even Sam's loyalty seemed suspect. Could friendship truly remain pure in a world where love had proven so fragile? He forced himself out of the car, pushing through his hesitation as though fighting an invisible, oppressive force. The cool air was damp, carrying a faint scent of approaching rain. Inside, the cafe smelled richly of espresso beans and fresh pastries, a comforting aroma that felt oddly out of place against Ethan's internal chaos. Sam was already waiting at a corner table, absorbed in thought, one hand casually holding a half-empty cup of espresso. When Ethan approached, Sam glanced up, concern and quiet warmth flickering in his steady blue eyes. He stood to greet Ethan, but Ethan remained carefully neutral, meeting his gaze without the usual warmth. "Hey, Ethan," Sam said quietly. "Glad you made it safely." Ethan offered a tight nod, sitting down slowly across from him. He could sense Sam's subtle confusion, the barely concealed surprise at Ethan's uncharacteristic guardedness. "Is everything okay?" Sam asked, studying him closely. The gentle concern in his tone was genuine, but Ethan's newly sharpened instinct questioned every word, every gesture. Ethan didn't respond immediately, instead ordering a coffee from a passing waitress. Only after she retreated did he speak, keeping his voice deliberately neutral. "I'm sorry if I seem distant. It's just difficult right now." The words felt inadequate, fragile bridges across a widening chasm. Sam watched him thoughtfully, choosing silence. It was this quiet patience that had always been Sam's strength, his willingness to simply wait, to let truth emerge in its own time. But now, that patience felt almost threatening, making Ethan wonder what other hidden motives might lie beneath Sam's quiet support. The coffee arrived, steaming hot and bitterly fragrant. Ethan stirred it slowly, lost momentarily in the swirling patterns of dark liquid and foam. His own reflection gazed back, distorted and uncertain, a visual echo of his internal disarray. Finally, Ethan lifted his eyes, finding Sam's gaze still calm, still steady, as if trying to communicate reassurance through silence alone. It struck Ethan suddenly how deeply Vanessa's betrayal had wounded him, not merely through the act itself, but by fracturing his ability to trust even those closest to him. Vanessa's betrayal changed something, Ethan admitted softly, voice barely audible above the hum of surrounding conversations. "It didn't just take away trust. It damaged my ability to trust at all. Even you, Sam. I find myself doubting everyone now, questioning motives, intentions." Sam's expression softened into quiet understanding, the compassion in his eyes undiminished despite Ethan's implied suspicion. "Trust is a fragile thing, Ethan," Sam said carefully, leaning forward slightly. "Betrayal poisons the well, but not everyone will betray you." Ethan frowned, his jaw tightening involuntarily. "But how can I know that? Vanessa was the last person I ever thought would betray me. And yet she did, effortlessly, without remorse." Sam exhaled slowly, nodding in quiet acknowledgement. "I understand why you doubt. And honestly, I don't blame you. But trust isn't something logical or guaranteed. It's a risk every time. The question isn't whether someone might hurt you again. It's whether you're willing to take that risk, knowing you're strong enough to survive even if they do. Sam's words hung in the air between them, heavy with sincerity. Ethan watched his friend closely, searching for signs of deceit or hidden agendas. But all he found was an open expression, a straightforward honesty he'd known for years. The realization settled uneasily within him that his suspicion was unfairly projected, born not of evidence, but of wounds still fresh and bleeding. "I moved the money weeks ago," Ethan admitted suddenly, his voice sharper, defensive. "Quietly, without telling anyone. I was already preparing for something, though I wasn't entirely sure what. And now, I've begun to doubt even my closest friend. It's not you, Sam, it's this situation. It makes everything feel tainted." Sam met his admission with calm dignity, absorbing Ethan's pain without judgment. "I get it, Ethan. Betrayal can twist everything. But if you shut everyone out, she wins again. Vanessa doesn't just steal your trust. She steals your chance to heal, to find support." A wave of shame washed through Ethan, hot and uncomfortable. Sam was right. By closing himself off, Ethan allowed Vanessa's betrayal to poison even those bonds that remained unbroken. It was the cruelest consequence of deceit. It reached beyond the act itself, sowing distrust in soil where none had existed before. Slowly, Ethan's resistance began to crumble. He felt exhausted by suspicion, by carrying the heavy armor of distrust. He had always believed that trust was his greatest strength, something freely given and openly embraced. Vanessa had tried to take that away, but only he could truly surrender it. "I'm sorry," Ethan said at last, meeting Sam's eyes fully for the first time since arriving. "You don't deserve my doubt." Sam offered a gentle, forgiving smile, the tension between them visibly easing. "We're good, Ethan. Always have been, always will be. You're allowed to doubt after everything you've experienced. I'll still be here. I'm not going anywhere." Ethan nodded, feeling a quiet warmth seep slowly back into his chest, filling the void left by betrayal with something softer, deeper, true friendship. He sipped his espresso, savoring its rich bitterness, feeling the coffee ground him in reality once more. Outside, the rain had finally arrived, pattering gently against the cafe windows. Ethan watched the droplets race downward, tracing unpredictable paths along the glass. Each droplet an uncertain journey, fragile and vulnerable. Yet together, they formed a steady stream, flowing inevitably downward, reshaping and renewing in their descent. "I'll need your help, Sam," Ethan said finally, his voice firm again, infused with a renewed sense of purpose. "To make sure she can't hurt anyone else." "You have it," Sam assured without hesitation. "Always." As Ethan sat across from his oldest friend, he felt a profound shift within himself. Trust was no longer something passive, but a conscious, courageous choice. He had risked again, opened himself to the possibility of betrayal, but also to healing and true connection. In that quiet cafe, amidst the bittersweet aroma of espresso, Ethan discovered something Vanessa's betrayal had not destroyed: his capacity to trust, cautiously, deliberately, yet fiercely once more. And though the path ahead remained uncertain, he knew he was not alone. He had reclaimed something more precious than anything Vanessa had taken: hope. Rain battered the windows of Sam's modest office, the water streaming down the glass in turbulent cascades, reflecting Ethan's restless inner world. The rhythmic tapping, harsh and insistent, underscored the tension filling the room. A desk lamp spilled a weak circle of light onto a scattered array of documents, their edges curling slightly, saturated by the oppressive humidity that had slipped silently into every corner of the space. Ethan leaned forward, the muscles in his shoulders tense beneath his rumpled shirt. Sam sat opposite him, his posture carefully neutral, fingers gently flipping through papers, brow furrowed in concentration. The quiet intensity between them was palpable, underscored by the distant roll of thunder, a muted echo of Ethan's own inner storm. "Are you absolutely sure?" Ethan asked, his voice calm but tight with suppressed anxiety. His question hung in the air, poised like a blade above the fragile balance of trust he'd only recently begun to rebuild. Sam nodded slowly, eyes serious as he met Ethan's troubled gaze. "Unfortunately, yes. It's all here, every detail. She didn't just sell the cabin. She forged your signature on multiple documents. Identity theft, Ethan. She's been using your name, your credit, everything, to fund Darius's ventures." Ethan felt a sickening twist in his gut, as if gravity itself had abandoned him, leaving him weightless and disoriented. Each revelation about Vanessa had cut deeper, but this was an entirely new wound. Colder, crueler, more invasive. The idea of her stealing not just property, but the very essence of who he was, made him physically nauseous. Trust had been betrayed before, but this felt like a desecration of his very identity. He ran his fingers through his hair, gripping tightly at the roots as he exhaled, trying desperately to ground himself in this new, harsh reality. "How could she?" Ethan whispered, his voice cracking despite his attempts at control. "How could she go that far?" Sam laid down the papers gently, his expression quietly sympathetic but unyielding. "Because for her, Ethan, none of this was personal anymore. She viewed you as a means to an end, and when you became inconvenient, she just replaced you with your own name, your own credit." The words landed like blows, each one pushing him closer to the edge of disbelief. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to comprehend the depth of Vanessa's calculated cruelty. He had loved her, trusted her implicitly, had built a life based on the promise of mutual honesty. The image of her carefully forging his name, calmly assuming his identity, burned vividly in his mind, twisting memories he once cherished into something painful and distorted. Sam spoke softly again, drawing Ethan back from the brink. "Ethan, there's something else. It may be even worse." Ethan opened his eyes, dread forming a cold knot in his chest. "Worse than identity theft?" Sam hesitated briefly, taking a deep breath before continuing. "You remember the condo in Seattle, the one you bought years ago when you first started your firm? The one you planned to use for business trips but never did?" Ethan blinked, momentarily confused. That memory was buried deep, lost beneath layers of more immediate concerns. "The condo? It's been years. I almost forgot it existed." "Well, Vanessa didn't." Sam's voice lowered, edged with an unsettling gravity. "She refinanced it, Ethan, quietly, last year, using your credentials and her forged signatures. She took out a significant loan against it, funneling every cent into Darius's wellness empire. She's leveraged your forgotten property as collateral for her lover's ambitions." Ethan stared blankly at the raindrops drumming violently against the window pane, each impact echoing through his skull like a muted hammer blow. This additional revelation felt surreal, a cruel nightmare from which he desperately wished to awaken. Yet it was all too real, laid out before him in stark, undeniable detail. "What am I supposed to do now?" Ethan asked, bitterness seeping into his voice. "How do I even start untangling this mess?" Sam leaned closer, his voice calm but firm. "First, we gather indisputable proof. Signatures, paperwork, bank transactions, everything. She was meticulous, but no one can erase every trace. We have the evidence. Now we make sure it's airtight." Ethan shook his head slowly, the enormity of Vanessa's deception nearly suffocating him. He had always believed love was an exchange of vulnerability, not a war of hidden knives. Her betrayal was not merely a breach of trust, but an annihilation of the identity he'd carefully built and protected. "I trusted her completely," Ethan murmured, the confession quiet, raw, almost involuntary. "And all this time she was systematically dismantling my entire life?" Sam watched him carefully, his eyes filled with a steady compassion. "That's the cruelty of betrayal. It's never done halfway. She knew what she was doing, Ethan. She took advantage of your trust, your love, your faith in her. But now it's time to reclaim your life." Ethan absorbed Sam's words slowly, allowing their weight to settle within him. He felt a surge of bitterness mingled with sadness, not just for what he'd lost, but for the person he'd once believed Vanessa to be. The woman he had loved seemed nothing more now than a carefully crafted illusion, a mask worn with precision and cruelty. Yet beneath his sadness and bitterness, Ethan also felt something else: determination. Quiet, steady resolve. The person Vanessa had exploited, the man she had betrayed and manipulated, still existed. He was battered, bruised, betrayed, but not broken. Ethan recognized this with clarity. His identity was more than his name, his credit score, or even his property. His identity was rooted in something deeper, something Vanessa could never truly touch: integrity, resilience, and an unshakable belief in justice. The rain intensified outside, hammering relentlessly against the glass, drowning out the world beyond the office walls. Ethan took a long breath, feeling himself emerge from beneath the crushing weight of betrayal. He looked squarely at Sam, his voice calm and steady. "Tell me exactly what we need to do." Sam straightened, nodding firmly. "We file formal charges immediately. Identity theft, forgery, fraud, it's all actionable. She left fingerprints everywhere, Ethan. We'll take this to court and lay it all out clearly. She underestimated you, and now she'll face the consequences." Ethan felt a quiet strength stir within him, warmth spreading through his veins, thawing the cold numbness that had gripped him since Vanessa's first confession. He was angry, yes, but it was controlled anger, precise and purposeful, directed toward justice rather than vengeance. "Do it," Ethan said softly, decisively. "We move forward with everything. I won't let her destroy any more of my life." Sam offered a reassuring nod, silent but solid in his support. Ethan felt immense gratitude for the steady presence of his friend, realizing anew the preciousness of genuine trust, the profound importance of true friendship. The rain slowed slightly, shifting from violent drumming to a quieter rhythm. Ethan rose slowly from the chair, gathering the documents, feeling oddly lighter despite their heavy weight of betrayal. He stepped toward the door, pausing briefly to glance once more through the rain-streaked windows, seeing reflections of the city distorted in the streaming water. The world outside had not changed, but within Ethan, everything had. Vanessa's betrayal had scarred him deeply, wounded him in ways he had never imagined possible. Yet in this quiet moment, he understood something essential. Identity could never truly be stolen. It could only be challenged, tested, refined. He would reclaim his life, rebuild it on foundations stronger than before. He would no longer be merely a victim of deception, but a man who had faced treachery head-on and survived. Ethan stepped confidently into the hallway, leaving the office door ajar behind him. Outside, the storm continued, but within his heart, a calm determination had taken root, unwavering and unyielding. He was ready, finally, to face whatever came next. Ethan sat in his dimly lit apartment, the hum of the city outside filtering through the glass window. It had been weeks since the night at the restaurant, since her confession that shattered his world. He had kept his distance, no calls, no texts, no responses to her frantic messages. He had erased himself from her life as though he had never existed, letting her feel the emptiness left behind. But now, after all the silence, something inside him had shifted. The anger was still there, coiled tightly within him, but it had taken a back seat to something deeper, something quieter. It wasn't just about punishing Vanessa anymore. It wasn't about revenge in the way he had once thought. It was about regaining control over his own life, over his emotions. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that silence alone wasn't enough. He needed to make her feel it, not with confrontation, not with rage, but with subtlety, quiet and devastating in its precision. The truth was, the way Vanessa had lived, the way she moved through the world, was always so loud, so certain of itself, as if it was invulnerable. But Ethan understood now that people like her weren't immune to anxiety, to the creeping realization that they might lose control. Vanessa had always been sure that the world was her stage, and everyone else simply played along. What he realized was that when you make someone who believes they are the main character in their own story question their role, when you make them feel like they are just a shadow in someone else's, you tear apart their sense of identity. That was the power of silence, of absence, but it was time to tweak his strategy. Ethan leaned forward, his fingers hovering over his phone. His mind raced with the idea. Vanessa had been waiting for him to beg her to come back, waiting for him to falter. She was expecting him to break. She was expecting him to show weakness. But what if he did the opposite? What if he let her watch him heal? What if he let her see him living a life without her, without even acknowledging her existence? He opened his Instagram account, which he hadn't used in months, and scrolled through his old posts. There were photos of the two of them, vacations, celebrations, casual moments that now seemed like someone else's life. He selected a few. The images were not anything extraordinary, but they spoke of happiness, of a time before everything shattered. A picture of a sunset they had watched together in a quiet beach town. A close-up shot of his coffee cup and the open book he had been reading by the window. Something simple, something that screamed peace. Without a word, he uploaded the photos, one by one. The captions were minimal, just enough to give them context. No long explanations, no cryptic messages. Just the images, the kind of photos anyone could post on a quiet, unremarkable day. He didn't tag anyone, didn't mention any details. It wasn't about broadcasting his happiness. It was about allowing her to see the life he was slowly rebuilding without her. The power wasn't in the posts themselves. It was in the absence of any direct connection. The absence of her. Ethan sat back and stared at his phone. The silence was louder now, and in that silence, he could almost hear the gears turning in Vanessa's mind. He didn't need to watch her panic. He knew it would come. It always did. Over the next few days, Ethan watched as his phone began to light up with notifications. Messages from friends and acquaintances, people commenting on the pictures, light, casual remarks about how nice it was to see him out in the world again. But the most telling response came in the form of a message from Vanessa, unexpected and strangely urgent. Her text was short, too brief to mask the tension, but the underlying anxiety bled through. "I saw your pictures. Where are you? What's going on with you?" There it was, the crack in her armor. A question laced with concern, not for him, but for her own position in his life. She needed answers, but more importantly, she needed to know she still had some hold over him. Ethan didn't respond. He didn't even open the message right away. Instead, he turned off his phone, letting the stillness fill the space around him, the sound of his own breath louder than the world outside. This wasn't a message that needed to be answered. No, the true power was in leaving her on read, letting her hang in that anxious space of uncertainty. Days passed, and with each passing one, Vanessa's desperation grew more apparent. She sent more texts, increasingly urgent, but Ethan remained silent, maintaining the calculated quiet. The messages became more personal. She spoke less about the pictures, focusing more on what she thought was the underlying issue between them. But even in her words, there was something that gave her away, an underlying tone of fear. "I don't understand why you're doing this. Please, talk to me. I need to know if there's any chance we can fix this. I didn't mean to hurt you." It was the same message she had sent 100 times, but now it felt different, genuine, perhaps, but rooted in her need for control. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was simply trying to reclaim the space she thought she had lost. Ethan read the message, his finger hovering over the reply button for just a moment. He was tempted. For a second, the old patterns rose up within him, the desire to explain, to make her understand, to return to what they had been. But he held his ground, letting the silence speak louder than any words could. It was the same message she had sent 100 times, but now it felt different, genuine, perhaps, but rooted in her need for control. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was simply trying to reclaim the space she thought she had lost. Ethan read the message, his finger hovering over the reply button for just a moment. He was tempted. For a second, the old patterns rose up within him, the desire to explain, to make her understand, to return to what they had been. But he held his ground, letting the silence speak louder than any words could. "Please, Ethan, what are you doing? Why are you shutting me out? I've been thinking about us. I miss you." Ethan knew that the most dangerous thing he could do now was to reply. He didn't need to, didn't want to. The silence was doing all the work for him. He smiled to himself, looking out the window at the landscape beyond, the distant horizon, the trees, the open sky. There was no anger left in him. There was no need for it. What remained was a quiet, unwavering power, proof that some wounds heal not through confrontation or rage, but through the subtle art of letting go. And as he watched the sun dip below the horizon, Ethan knew that Vanessa's world, like the shadows stretching before him, would soon be swallowed by the weight of her own unspoken fears. She would wait for him. She would always wait. But he was already gone. And this time, he was never coming back. The night had arrived quietly, covering Denver in a veil of shadow and mist. A gentle drizzle tapped steadily against Sam's window, the droplets running down the glass like tears on a cold face. Ethan sat on the edge of the worn leather couch in Sam's modest apartment, eyes fixed on the intricate patterns woven into the rug beneath his feet. He found himself tracing those patterns over and over, trying to keep his thoughts from spinning into chaos. It was strange being here, surrounded by Sam's familiar belongings, yet feeling disconnected and adrift. The comforting atmosphere, filled with memories of countless evenings shared, now seemed surreal, almost foreign, because Ethan himself was not the same man he had been. Betrayal had reshaped him into someone cautious, careful, and deeply uncertain of where his next step would take him. A soft knock echoed through the apartment, startling him. Sam had left earlier to pick up dinner, promising a distraction they both knew Ethan wouldn't find in food. He rose hesitantly, not expecting anyone else. Walking slowly toward the door, he felt a flicker of unease, the knock somehow heavier in significance than it should have been. When he opened the door, a woman stood in the shadowed hallway, eyes wary yet intensely focused on him. Her dark hair was slightly damp, small raindrops shimmering delicately under the dim glow of the hallway's lights. Ethan noticed her careful stance immediately, guarded, shoulders drawn inward, as though she feared stepping too close. "Ethan," her voice was soft, uncertain, carrying a delicate edge of vulnerability. "I'm Elena. I spoke briefly with Sam earlier. He told me where I could find you." Recognition dawned slowly, connecting her name to fragments of conversation Sam had shared. Carefully worded, cautious revelations about another victim entangled in Darius and Vanessa's manipulations. Ethan stepped back, silently inviting her inside. She moved cautiously into the apartment, glancing around as though searching for hidden threats, her posture a mirror of his own hesitant heart. They sat opposite each other, separated by a glass coffee table strewn with forgotten magazines and half-finished coffee cups, artifacts of simpler days. Ethan studied her quietly, sensing a deep well of unresolved pain beneath her calm exterior. "You didn't have to come," he began gently. "I know it can't be easy, speaking about something so personal." Elena's gaze met his briefly, searching his eyes for sincerity before shifting away. "It's not easy, no, but I needed to, for myself, and perhaps for you as well." Her voice trembled slightly, betraying a crack in her carefully maintained composure. Ethan remained silent, giving her the space to gather her words, respecting the courage it took to confront such raw, shared wounds. "I've known Darius a long time," she finally confessed, her voice low and reflective. "He was charming, charismatic, and so good at convincing me, convincing everyone. He was sincere. He promised a new life, something better. I trusted him completely, like you trusted Vanessa, I imagine." Ethan's chest tightened involuntarily at the mention of Vanessa's name, the wound fresh and searing. He nodded slowly, urging her quietly to continue. "We were together for years," Elena continued carefully, her words chosen deliberately, as if each memory were fragile and dangerous. He drew me into his dreams, convinced me to finance his ventures, invest my savings. He said we were building our future. Then, one day, he just disappeared. No note, no explanation. My money was gone, my trust shattered. She paused, visibly shaken, fighting to control the tremor in her voice. When I learned about you and Vanessa through Sam, everything resurfaced. Old wounds reopened. I couldn't stay silent. I felt compelled to warn you, not just about the money or the betrayal, but the depth of their manipulation. They thrive on trust, then use it like a weapon against us. Ethan stared at her, the pieces slowly aligning themselves into a painful pattern he recognized too well. Elena's betrayal mirrored his own, personal, financial, deeply emotional. Her pain echoed the raw ache in his own heart, weaving their experiences together into a shared tapestry of betrayal and loss. "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered, the words emerging quietly, sincerely. "No one deserves what happened to you." Elena's eyes glistened faintly, the first signs of emotion breaking through her careful defenses. "Nor you. Yet here we both are, tied together by their deceit." A silence settled between them, rich and heavy with unspoken understanding. Ethan watched Elena closely, recognizing her struggle as his own. The careful rebuilding of trust, the tentative steps toward healing. They were both traveling that same precarious path. "What do we do now?" Ethan finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She glanced up at him, hesitation flickering briefly before determination settled firmly into her eyes. "We fight back, not just legally, not just financially. We rebuild ourselves stronger than before. We reclaim the lives they tried to destroy." Ethan saw the fire in her eyes, felt an answering spark ignite within himself. It was not the hot flame of vengeance, but a cooler, steadier glow, one of resilience and newfound strength. "Darius and Vanessa are counting on our silence, on our brokenness," Elena continued, her voice steadying with conviction. "But we won't give them that satisfaction. The truth must come out, and we must be the ones to reveal it." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding now that their mutual suffering had forged an unexpected alliance, a bond deeper than mere shared pain. They had each survived profound betrayal, endured the deliberate unraveling of their lives, and now stood together, determined to reclaim their identities and their futures. As the rain continued softly outside, threads of shared purpose and quiet resolve intertwined between them. Elena rose slowly, pausing by the door to face Ethan again, her expression gentle yet fiercely determined. "Thank you for listening," she said quietly. "I wasn't sure I could face this again, but you made it easier." Ethan smiled faintly, sincerity warming his weary heart. "You've helped me too, more than you know." She slipped quietly out the door, leaving Ethan alone in the softened silence. He returned slowly to the couch, staring thoughtfully at the woven patterns on the rug again, now seeing them differently. No longer random, chaotic threads, but interconnected paths forming a complex and beautiful design. The betrayal had hurt deeply, leaving scars and questions without easy answers. But in this quiet moment, Ethan understood something crucial. The tangled threads of his pain were slowly, steadily transforming into the strength needed to weave a new tapestry, one of resilience, courage, and an unbreakable determination to heal. The early morning sun slid through the gaps in the curtains of Marcus's small downtown office, casting thin slices of amber light across stacks of papers and coffee mugs filled with yesterday's bitterness. Marcus moved swiftly, methodically through documents, his gaze sharp behind thin-rimmed glasses, his concentration unwavering despite the chaos around him. Ethan watched quietly from a worn chair in the corner, the smell of stale coffee and old leather creating a cocoon of familiarity as he waited. Marcus was a rare breed of investigator, patient, precise, and relentless, qualities Ethan had come to deeply admire. In the brief weeks since they'd begun their cautious collaboration, Marcus had become an anchor, his quiet presence grounding Ethan through revelations that threatened to sweep him away. Trust had become Ethan's rarest commodity, yet Marcus, with his cool efficiency and understated integrity, had somehow earned it. "Got something," Marcus murmured suddenly, breaking Ethan's reflective silence. Ethan straightened immediately, sensing a shift in Marcus's controlled demeanor. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low but edged with apprehension. He knew from experience that Marcus rarely exaggerated. Whatever he had found, it was serious. Marcus adjusted his glasses, pulling out several documents and laying them carefully across his desk. Vanessa wasn't stopping at the Seattle condo or the forged signatures. She had something else planned, something bigger. She's been quietly setting up an exclusive yoga retreat. Ethan frowned slightly, his confusion clear. A yoga retreat? Why is that significant? Marcus leaned forward, the intensity in his eyes sharpening. Because it's registered entirely under your identity, Ethan, your social security number, your financial credentials. She even filed preliminary funding applications using your name and credit rating. It was going to be her next big move, drawing in investors, taking deposits, then likely vanishing, leaving you holding the responsibility. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, the depth of Vanessa's manipulation striking him with brutal clarity. The betrayal was no longer simply personal or financial. It had become systemic, intricately woven into the fabric of his identity. She was not merely deceiving him. She was actively destroying the foundations upon which his entire life had been built. The office grew silent as Marcus allowed Ethan to process the magnitude of this new revelation. Sunlight continued its slow crawl across the cluttered desk, highlighting documents filled with carefully crafted deceit. Ethan stared at them, feeling a bitter sense of awe at Vanessa's calculated boldness. She was building an entire empire on my ruin, Ethan whispered, almost to himself. Every step of the way, using pieces of who I am to fuel her ambitions. Marcus nodded solemnly. That's exactly how these people operate. They prey on trust, counting on silence and confusion to keep their plans hidden. But now we know, and knowledge is powerful. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to remain calm, methodical. It was easy to feel overwhelmed, to let anger cloud his judgment. But the quiet intensity radiating from Marcus served as a reminder. Loud emotion would solve nothing. Strategy, precision, and patience, these were his true weapons now. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice steadying, determination replacing his initial shock. "How can we dismantle something like this without tipping her off?" Marcus leaned back thoughtfully, fingers tinted beneath his chin, eyes distant yet focused. "First, we gather irrefutable proof, financial documents, registration forms, digital fingerprints. She may have been careful, but she's not flawless. Second, we quietly freeze her access. I have contacts in banking. We can lock down any lines of credit tied to your identity without raising immediate alarms." Ethan nodded slowly, recognizing Marcus's cool, calculated reasoning. And the retreat? Investors? Shouldn't we warn them? Marcus shook his head slightly. Not yet. If we move prematurely, she'll vanish. Right now, she still believes she's invisible, protected by your stolen identity. We must use that arrogance against her. Ethan considered Marcus's words carefully, realizing their strategy hinged on Vanessa's confidence, her belief that she had fooled everyone, that no one was watching. He would need to remain quiet, composed, and seemingly unaware while they meticulously unraveled every thread of her deception. The stakes felt impossibly high, but beneath the weight of responsibility, Ethan also felt something new, a quiet resolve, colder and stronger than anything he had experienced before. This was not the hot surge of vengeance, but a calm, focused determination. Vanessa had underestimated him profoundly, believing she could dismantle his life without consequence. Now he would quietly, patiently prove her wrong. Over the following days, Marcus and Ethan meticulously gathered evidence, working long hours within the dim confines of Marcus's office. Each document uncovered, each digital footprint tracked down, strengthened Ethan's resolve. It was painstaking work, requiring quiet dedication and unwavering patience. Yet Ethan felt invigorated by every small victory. Marcus's network was extensive, his resources invaluable. Bit by bit, they secured control, closing avenues of deception, silently and methodically reclaiming Ethan's stolen identity. With each carefully executed step, Ethan felt more like himself, reclaiming not just his credit or property, but the very essence of who he was. One late evening, exhausted yet strangely energized, Ethan leaned back in the worn chair, the warm glow of a desk lamp illuminating the room in soft amber. Marcus sat opposite him, carefully cataloging their findings. Quiet battles are the hardest, Marcus remarked softly, breaking their thoughtful silence. They test patience, resilience, and character. Anyone can fight loudly, publicly, but true strength is measured in these quiet moments, in restraint, strategy, and unwavering purpose. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, understanding profoundly the truth in Marcus's words. Vanessa had relied on secrecy and deception, but now Ethan wielded his own quiet power, a strength born not of noise or spectacle, but of integrity and relentless resolve. She believed my silence was weakness, Ethan murmured, but silence can also be strength. She's about to learn that the hard way. Marcus met his eyes, a rare, knowing smile briefly lighting his serious expression. Exactly. The quietest battles often yield the greatest victories. Ethan rose slowly, stretching muscles stiff from hours of meticulous work. Outside, dusk had settled into darkness, the city lights flickering to life, illuminating countless lives, each one unaware of the quiet battle taking place just steps away. He left Marcus's office feeling lighter, clearer, stronger. The quiet determination within him had become an unshakable force, capable of dismantling even the most elaborate deception. As he walked through the dimly lit streets, Ethan realized something crucial. Betrayal had changed him, yes, but not broken him. In fact, it had revealed something vital, something he had not fully understood until now. He was stronger, deeper, and more resilient than Vanessa could have ever anticipated. She had tried to erase him, to build her empire upon the fragments of his identity. But those fragments had reassembled, forged anew by quiet strength, patience, and integrity. Now, as the quiet battle intensified, Ethan understood that victory would not be measured by revenge, but by the quiet reclamation of everything she had tried to destroy. The courtroom was smaller than Ethan had expected, suffused with sterile brightness and the oppressive scent of polished wood and anxiety. Each sound echoed sharply, magnified by the hard walls and high ceilings, amplifying whispers and hushed murmurs into reverberating waves of tension. Ethan sat rigidly beside Vivian, his lawyer, feeling his heartbeat thud painfully beneath his chest. He fixed his gaze firmly ahead, striving to remain composed, yet each breath felt tighter than the last. Vanessa sat opposite, her presence commanding despite the subdued simplicity of her attire. Her face bore none of the arrogance he'd braced himself against, none of the cold indifference he'd witnessed when she revealed her betrayal. Instead, she wore an expression of gentle remorse, her eyes wide and glistening with apparent sincerity. Ethan felt a pang, a sudden, unexpected ache of doubt, as memories of happier days rushed back unbidden, coloring his anger with softer shades of uncertainty. Vivian leaned over slightly, her voice a quiet murmur in Ethan's ear. "Remember, deception wears many faces. Don't let appearances undermine what we know to be true." He nodded stiffly, forcing his eyes away from Vanessa's imploring gaze, feeling grateful for Vivian's steadfast calm. Yet, even as he fought to remain resolute, he felt himself slipping, uncertainty clawing subtly beneath the surface of his resolve. The judge cleared his throat, and Ethan tensed instinctively. The proceedings began, each word spoken by lawyers, witnesses, and experts weaving a tangled tapestry of truths and lies. Ethan watched Vanessa's attorney meticulously craft an image of vulnerability around her, a loving wife, misunderstood, misguided, and deeply remorseful. When it was Vanessa's turn to testify, she rose slowly, her posture carefully humble, eyes lowered demurely until she faced the judge. She spoke softly, voice trembling slightly, layered perfectly with restrained emotion. "I made mistakes," she began, her tone gentle and regretful. "Terrible mistakes born of desperation, confusion, and misplaced trust. Ethan was always good to me, patient and kind. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day he'll understand that my actions were never intended to harm him." Her voice broke slightly on the last words, the fracture so perfectly authentic Ethan felt his chest tighten further. Was it possible? Could she genuinely regret the pain she'd inflicted? In that instant, doubt pierced him again, deeper this time, sharper. He felt briefly adrift, trapped in the unsettling space between anger and uncertainty, truth and manipulation. Then Vivian stood, her presence firm, her voice clear and controlled. She held up a folder, thick, weighty, undeniable. "Ms. Duval, you speak eloquently about remorse. Yet remorse often comes when we face exposure, does it not?" Vanessa stiffened subtly, her careful expression faltering for just a fraction of a second before regaining its composure. "That's unfair," she murmured, voice trembling artfully. "I've admitted to my faults openly." Vivian's eyes hardened. "Perhaps, but remorse requires truth. Elena Phillips provided clear evidence of the ongoing scheme you were orchestrating with Darius Flint, a scheme funded exclusively by Ethan's stolen identity. Tell me, Ms. Duval, how do you reconcile sincere remorse with continued deception?" A hush fell over the courtroom, silence thickening the air like smoke, tense and suffocating. Ethan's breath stilled in anticipation, his heart steadying as Vivian placed the damning documents before the judge, each page crisp and irrefutable. He watched Vanessa closely, saw the faint flicker of panic in her carefully controlled expression, the subtle shift in her posture from assured humility to brittle defensiveness. Ethan's doubt dissipated like fog beneath a rising sun. Vivian's firm clarity cut through Vanessa's careful illusion, reminding him vividly that manipulation was Vanessa's strongest weapon, one she'd wielded effortlessly for years. But now, exposed under the harsh scrutiny of truth, her crafted facade began to crumble. Vanessa's attorney attempted to recover ground, objecting sharply to Vivian's evidence, but the judge waved the objections away, eyes scanning the documents intently. Vivian continued relentlessly, her voice calm, yet piercing, weaving together the meticulous web of deception Vanessa had carefully spun. Ethan's trust was not merely broken, Vivian declared steadily. It was systematically dismantled, exploited, and weaponized. His life was invaded, his identity used as a tool for fraud. Remorse after exposure is not sincerity, it's strategy. Ethan felt a quiet strength rising within him, the lingering whispers of doubt finally silenced by undeniable proof. His trust in Vivian and Elena's truth-telling had anchored him firmly, fortifying his resolve, allowing him to see Vanessa clearly once again, not as a woman deserving his lingering pity, but as someone who had deliberately chosen manipulation over love, betrayal over honesty. Vivian rested her case, and Ethan exhaled slowly, releasing tension he hadn't realized he was holding. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat still, her poise fractured, the confident glow extinguished from her eyes. She stared ahead blankly, the reality of her actions weighing visibly upon her. The courtroom remained silent, the quiet charged with anticipation as the judge deliberated. Ethan sat rigidly, heart steady now, gaze unwavering. Moments stretched painfully, time moving with agonizing slowness. Each second weighted with the gravity of final judgment. When the judge finally spoke, his voice resonated clearly, calmly decisive. Given the overwhelming evidence presented, including deliberate identity theft, fraud, and ongoing deceit, the court finds in favor of Mr. Ethan Hart. The words settled heavily in the silence, profound and definitive. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, relief mingling unexpectedly with quiet sadness. Vanessa's choices had left their marriage in ashes, charred remnants of trust and intimacy irreparably destroyed. Yet amidst those ashes, he sensed the faint stirrings of renewal, quiet strength forged in fire, tempered by truth. As the court adjourned, Vivian offered Ethan a reassuring nod, her eyes quietly triumphant. "Truth is rarely easy," she said softly, her tone gentle yet firm. "But it always prevails in the end." Ethan stood slowly, glancing once more toward Vanessa. She avoided his gaze, eyes lowered, shoulders bowed beneath the weight of consequence. He felt a fleeting pang, not doubt this time, but sorrow for what might have been, for paths not chosen, trust betrayed. Yet he turned away without bitterness, stepping resolutely toward the courtroom doors. The quiet battles had culminated here, in ashes of deception scattered across the polished courtroom floor. Now, finally free from Vanessa's carefully spun lies, Ethan felt lighter, clearer, stronger. Walking through the heavy oak doors into the corridor beyond, Ethan knew the courtroom ashes marked an end, but also a beginning. Betrayal had tried to destroy him, yet he had emerged tempered, wiser, quietly powerful. And as he stepped into the light beyond those courtroom walls, Ethan understood at last that true strength lay not in revenge, but in reclaiming oneself from the ruins, piece by determined piece. Dawn broke quietly, painting the eastern sky with delicate strokes of rose and amber, as Ethan stood at the trailhead, breathing in the sharp, clean scent of mountain air. The forest before him lay shrouded in mist, a silent world of dew-drenched leaves and shadowed pathways. He felt a deep yearning within himself, a need to walk, to move, to lose and find himself again amid the solitude of wilderness. The past weeks had been a relentless storm. Courtrooms, lawyers, papers, and accusations echoing bitterly in the sterile halls of justice. But even after Vanessa's manipulations had unraveled and her guilt became crystal clear, remnants of the destruction she'd wrought lingered. Ethan had discovered one final, unexpected consequence of her deceit, a debt tied legally to his name, a twisted artifact left behind by her fraudulent schemes. A debt that wasn't his, yet legally bound to him nonetheless. Marcus had recommended appealing, confident that evidence would ultimately clear Ethan's name entirely. Vivian, too, urged patience and confidence in the courts. And yet, standing at the edge of this quiet mountain trail, Ethan felt something else calling him, a deeper, subtler truth that whispered from within the silence of his own heart. He adjusted the straps of his backpack, feeling the familiar weight pressing firmly against his shoulders. He stepped onto the trail, the earth beneath his boots soft from recent rains. The forest closed gently around him, swallowing him in the comforting embrace of silence, broken only by the occasional murmur of wind through towering pines and the distant, melodic call of hidden birds. With every step deeper into the wilderness, Ethan felt the tangled tension in his chest begin to loosen. His mind wandered freely, unburdened by the constant pressure of legal strategy and painful memories. Instead, he found himself thinking about the man he once was, the man he had become, and the man he still longed to be. Hours passed slowly, the rhythm of his steps syncing naturally with the pulse of the earth around him. Eventually, Ethan emerged onto an open ridge, the valley below sprawling out in breathtaking expanses of green and gold, framed by distant snow-capped peaks. He paused there, breathless not from exertion but from awe, humbled by the silent strength of the land spread before him. Lowering himself onto a moss-covered boulder, he allowed the stillness to envelop him. He thought about Vanessa and the wreckage she'd left in his life. He remembered vividly the courtroom, the careful manipulation on her face, the controlled tremor in her voice, and finally, her exposed deceit crumbling to ashes beneath the weight of truth. Yet even now, remnants of her betrayal clung stubbornly to his life. The debt she had created still lay like an unwanted anchor, pulling him back toward bitterness and anger each time he considered it. Marcus had been adamant. Fight it, clear your name fully. But Ethan found himself questioning this instinctive desire for vindication. Was justice always found in relentless battles, or could it sometimes lie hidden within acceptance? He watched clouds drift lazily across the sky, their shadows shifting slowly over the valley below. The longer he sat in quiet reflection, the clearer the answers seemed to become. This debt, unfair, unjust, and unwelcome as it was, represented more than just financial obligation. It symbolized the lingering chains of Vanessa's betrayal, the power she still wielded over him through resentment and unresolved anger. Paying it off quietly, without resistance, initially felt like surrender, like admitting defeat. Yet sitting there, bathed in the soft glow of morning sunlight, Ethan realized there was another path, a more profound choice hidden beneath the surface. To accept this unjust burden willingly, knowingly, was not weakness. Rather, it was the ultimate reclaiming of power. Vanessa had sought control through deception and manipulation, but Ethan held something far greater, the power to let go, to release himself fully from her toxic legacy. A breeze whispered softly through the pines, rustling the leaves gently around him, carrying with it the quiet wisdom of the mountains. Ethan drew in a slow, deep breath, feeling clarity settling within him like calm after a storm. He would not appeal. He would pay the debt, not in resignation, not out of defeat, but as a deliberate, conscious choice. In accepting this cost, he would sever the last remaining link Vanessa had forged between them, reclaiming not just his financial autonomy, but the deeper, emotional freedom he had fought so long to find. Descending the trail hours later, Ethan felt lighter, clearer, profoundly at peace with his decision. The mountains behind him stood resolute and enduring, silent witnesses to his quiet victory, not over Vanessa, but over himself, his bitterness, his anger, his lingering pain. When he reached his car, Ethan took out his phone and messaged Marcus simply, clearly, "I'm not appealing. I'll pay the debt. It's time to let go completely." Marcus's response came quickly, concerned yet respectful. "Are you sure? We can win this." Ethan smiled softly, typing back, "I've already won." He drove home slowly, savoring the quiet strength he'd discovered within himself. The shadows of betrayal still existed, yes, but their power had diminished, fading into memories he would someday view without pain or bitterness. Paying this price had become not a punishment but an act of liberation, an affirmation of his own strength, resilience, and ability to heal. In the solitude of his apartment later that night, Ethan transferred the funds quietly, decisively. Each keystroke felt symbolic, deliberate, the tangible enactment of his choice. Once complete, he leaned back in his chair, feeling strangely content. He knew clearly now, the true cost of betrayal was not measured in dollars, but in trust, vulnerability, and innocence lost. Yet, the price he had willingly paid marked not defeat, but the beginning of genuine freedom, a clear path forward unencumbered by resentment. Ethan closed his eyes, finally able to breathe fully, deeply. Paying the price had been painful, yet paradoxically freeing. He had chosen acceptance over anger, peace over resentment, strength over bitterness. In the quiet that followed, Ethan understood profoundly that the most powerful victories were those won silently, within oneself, in the quiet places of the heart where healing truly began. Ethan hadn't intended to stop at the animal shelter. It was an impulsive turn down an unfamiliar street, a deviation from the neatly planned path he'd plotted that morning. But as he passed the modest brick building, half hidden by drooping oaks whose shadows danced across the pavement, something pulled gently at him, a quiet whisper within his heart, a longing he couldn't fully name. He parked slowly, sitting in silence for a moment, uncertain why he had stopped. Through the windshield, he watched two volunteers moving gracefully behind wide glass windows, their gestures gentle, patient, reassuring. The faint sound of distant barking drifted through the open car window, muted yet insistent, as though each sound held its own fragment of forgotten stories and quiet pleas. Stepping from the car, Ethan felt unexpectedly vulnerable. His visit to the shelter was unplanned, but beneath the surface lay a tangled web of deeper meaning, fragments of loneliness, unspoken sorrow, and a subtle yearning for something undefined yet necessary. His steps slowed as he approached the entrance, uncertain, hesitant, but compelled forward nonetheless. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, faintly scented with antiseptic, dog fur, and the bittersweet traces of longing. A volunteer approached, her smile easy and genuine, softening the sterile edges of the room. "Good afternoon," she greeted warmly. "Can I help you?" "I'm just looking," Ethan replied awkwardly, glancing toward the rows of pens where eager noses pressed through metal bars, eyes wide with hope and quiet desperation. She nodded kindly, sensing his hesitation. "Take your time. Sometimes what we need finds us when we least expect it." Her words lingered, echoing softly as Ethan wandered slowly down the aisle. Each enclosure contained its own story, eyes filled with cautious curiosity or wary mistrust, paws tentatively placed against cage bars in hope of a gentle touch. Ethan felt a strange kinship with these creatures, each holding unseen wounds and buried hurts, waiting for someone who could see past the damage and into the quiet, tender core beneath. As he passed a cage near the end, Ethan paused instinctively, his gaze drawn to a scruffy black dog curled quietly in the corner. Unlike the others, this dog made no immediate effort to greet him. It remained still, head resting on paws, eyes fixed cautiously but steadily upon Ethan. He knelt slowly, his heart unexpectedly quickening. "Hey there," Ethan murmured softly, almost without intention. "What's your story?" The dog's ears flicked slightly, and Ethan felt something shift within him, a delicate movement deep inside, like the first stirrings of a forgotten emotion. The volunteer appeared again, quietly observant. "That's Scout. He came in a few weeks ago, found abandoned, hurt, scared. He's been slow to trust anyone since then." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words resonate profoundly within himself. "I understand that," he replied quietly, more to himself than to her. "Trust, it's hard to rebuild once it's broken." She regarded him thoughtfully, perceptive in her silence. "Would you like to meet him outside the cage?" Surprised by his own immediate nod of assent, Ethan stepped back, heart fluttering with quiet anticipation as she carefully opened Scout's enclosure. The dog stood slowly, hesitantly, his thin body tensed with wariness as he stepped gingerly forward, dark eyes never leaving Ethan's face. Outside the cage, Scout approached cautiously, ears alert, posture wary yet somehow brave in its quiet vulnerability. Ethan sank slowly to the floor, allowing the dog space, sensing that trust could not be rushed or demanded. For long, silent moments they merely watched each other, man and dog, connected by a shared understanding of quiet wounds and cautious hope. Then, with infinite care, Scout moved closer, inch by gentle inch, until Ethan felt the soft brush of warm fur against his fingertips. His heart constricted sharply, flooded with a sudden rush of tenderness he'd almost forgotten was possible. He stroked Scout's rough fur lightly, mindful of the fragile trust being silently offered. The volunteer watched quietly from a respectful distance, her smile soft with understanding. "Sometimes healing starts just like this," she murmured gently. "Not with words or grand gestures, but with small steps, quiet moments, and the courage to trust again. Ethan nodded wordlessly, throat tight with emotion. As Scout leaned tentatively into his touch, Ethan felt splinters deep within his soul begin to loosen, small, sharp fragments of hurt and betrayal, resentment and pain. It was as though Scout's cautious acceptance reached beneath the surface, touching wounds Ethan hadn't even realized remained raw. Time drifted slowly around them, a quiet oasis within the sterile confines of the shelter. Ethan found himself speaking softly, sharing fragments of his story with Scout, his voice steady yet filled with quiet vulnerability. Scout listened with patient, unjudging eyes, offering only silent companionship, quiet acceptance, a presence that felt profoundly healing. When Ethan finally rose, his decision was already made, not consciously, not through careful thought or planning, but spontaneously, gently, as natural as breathing. "I'd like to adopt him," he said quietly, voice firm with quiet certainty. The volunteer smiled warmly, eyes bright with unspoken understanding. "I think Scout chose you first." Outside the shelter, Scout walked quietly beside Ethan, their steps naturally matching in rhythm and trust. The air felt clearer, lighter, imbued with quiet hopefulness. Ethan realized something profound. Emotional healing wasn't a destination he could reach through deliberate effort alone. It was a journey, spontaneous and unexpected, arriving quietly when his heart was finally ready. Driving home with Scout settled calmly beside him, Ethan felt a quiet peace he'd thought forever lost. Betrayal had left deep scars, painful splinters embedded in his soul. Yet Scout's quiet companionship reminded him gently, powerfully, that wounds could heal, trust could be rebuilt, and love could blossom once again, not through force, but through patience, quiet courage, and the spontaneous grace of simple connection. As Ethan parked in front of his apartment, he glanced at Scout, who watched him calmly, trust already flickering quietly in his dark, gentle eyes. "Ready to go home?" Ethan murmured softly. Scout leaned slightly closer, answering with quiet certainty more powerful than words. And Ethan smiled gently, feeling those splinters in his soul slowly beginning to dissolve, transformed, not through struggle, but through the quiet, unexpected grace of a bond he hadn't sought, yet somehow had always needed. The evening air was crisp, carrying the subtle fragrance of autumn's slow decay, smoky embers, fallen leaves, and the fading sweetness of distant flowers. Ethan knelt before the fireplace in his living room, carefully arranging logs and kindling with practiced patience, as Scout lay quietly nearby, watching him with gentle, attentive eyes. Since adopting Scout, Ethan's life had found a rhythm of quiet simplicity, moments measured not by achievements or ambitions, but by the unspoken bond growing steadily between man and dog. Yet, even as he rebuilt himself piece by piece, Ethan knew some wounds lingered deeper than others, haunted places in his heart, shadowed corridors he still needed to traverse alone. The letter had arrived unexpectedly that morning, stark white against the wooden table in the foyer, the handwriting instantly recognizable. Ethan's chest had tightened involuntarily at the sight, an echo of old pain flaring to life beneath his carefully crafted composure. He'd hesitated, fingers hovering above the envelope, uncertain whether opening it would unlock closure or merely reopen old wounds. Eventually, curiosity and something deeper, perhaps an unspoken need for resolution, prompted him to slice the envelope carefully open, withdrawing a single folded page. Vanessa's handwriting was clear, elegant, deceptively graceful, each letter a carefully crafted reminder of the woman he'd once thought he knew intimately. Ethan, it began, her words poised and precise, carefully chosen. I never expected to write you again. But silence felt incomplete. There are things left unsaid, things you deserve to know. Ethan's grip tightened slightly as he read, the familiar ache of betrayal stirring again within his chest, tempered now by the quiet resilience he'd cultivated. You always thought you were smarter than me, Ethan, she continued, the tone subtly accusatory beneath its careful polish. You believed your moral high ground gave you clarity, but you never truly saw me, never understood the choices I was forced to make. Ethan's brow furrowed slightly, a vague unease prickling the edges of his heart. Forced? Was that her chosen justification now? Circumstance rather than intention, external pressure instead of personal responsibility? I never meant to hurt you. The letter went on, the handwriting betraying no hint of hesitation or regret, despite the words. But you left me no choice. Ethan paused, the paper trembling slightly in his grasp. His eyes lingered upon that last sentence, heavy with cryptic implication, ambiguous enough to tug subtly at old insecurities he'd thought long overcome. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. Even now, in her attempt at apology or explanation, Vanessa shifted blame subtly back onto him, twisting responsibility into something elusive, intangible, forever just beyond her reach. He stood quietly for several long moments, letter in hand, wrestling with the unsettling blend of emotions swirling quietly within him: anger, confusion, sorrow, and a reluctant, wearied empathy. Scout rose silently, padding softly across the room to press gently against Ethan's leg, offering silent support, a steady presence grounding him firmly in the present. Ethan breathed deeply, feeling the quiet comfort of Scout's presence steadying his heartbeat, softening the bitter edges of old pain. He knelt once more before the fireplace, carefully igniting the kindling, watching as tiny flames began to dance and spread, consuming the dry wood with eager hunger. The fire grew slowly, casting flickering shadows across Ethan's face as he gazed thoughtfully into its warmth. His grip loosened slightly on Vanessa's letter, her carefully crafted words now feeling lighter, less consequential. The flames beckoned gently, offering silent invitation, a chance to finally release the last remaining threads of connection, bitterness, and resentment binding him subtly to Vanessa's carefully constructed narrative. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan extended his hand, letter poised delicately above the flames, hesitation flickering briefly within him once more. His mind replayed memories both tender and bitter, laughter shared beneath moonlight, whispered dreams exchanged under stars, and the slow, insidious descent into betrayal that had ultimately torn them apart. Yet, within those memories, Ethan saw more clearly now, not just the pain inflicted, but the silent strength he had discovered within himself, the quiet resilience born from betrayal, the healing that arose quietly from ashes and ruin. With quiet resolve, Ethan lowered the letter slowly into the flames, watching as Vanessa's careful handwriting darkened, curled, and dissolved beneath the fire's gentle yet inexorable embrace. The edges burned slowly, turning black and brittle, each word consumed by flames until nothing remained but fragile ashes, small, delicate, weightless remnants scattered amidst the glowing embers. Scout watched him quietly, dark eyes reflecting firelight, patient and unjudging. Ethan reached gently to stroke the dog's soft fur, gratitude swelling quietly within him. Gratitude for companionship, quiet understanding, and the profound simplicity of genuine trust. As the last fragments of Vanessa's letter dissolved, Ethan felt something shift quietly within himself, a subtle yet powerful transformation. The splinters in his soul, jagged remnants of betrayal and pain, seemed finally loosened, drifting gently away upon currents of quiet acceptance and release. He remained quietly by the fire long after the letter had vanished, contemplation settling deeply within his heart. The ambiguity of Vanessa's words lingered briefly, like smoke dissipating slowly into the night, but Ethan recognized them now for what they were: evasive, carefully crafted attempts to deflect responsibility, subtle manipulations dressed artfully in regret. The fire crackled softly, logs collapsing gently into glowing embers, warmth radiating steadily outward. Ethan knew instinctively that true healing lay not in deciphering hidden meanings or revisiting old arguments, but in choosing to move beyond them entirely, in severing the emotional cords tethering him subtly to the past. When he finally rose, Ethan felt lighter, clearer, quietly at peace. Betrayal had scarred him deeply, yes, but those scars had become quietly beautiful in their own right, reminders of resilience, courage, and the quiet strength found only through profound hurt and genuine healing. "Come on, Scout," Ethan murmured gently, stepping quietly from the warmth of the fire's glow. Scout followed silently, footsteps soft and steady beside him, unwavering and true. Ethan knew now that burning the letter had been more than mere symbolic gesture. It had been the quiet reclamation of himself, the final, decisive step toward emotional freedom. Vanessa's words had sought ambiguity, blame-shifting, and control, but in their dissolution, Ethan found genuine clarity. Outside, the night air was cold yet invigorating, stars gleaming quietly above. Ethan breathed deeply, feeling the lingering heat of the fire still warming his chest, melting away the last shadows of doubt. As he walked silently beneath the star-filled sky, Scout trotting softly beside him, Ethan understood deeply and profoundly that some letters, like some bonds, were meant to burn quietly away, not out of bitterness, anger, or resentment, but out of quiet wisdom, genuine strength, and the healing power of letting go. The morning dawned softly, ribbons of golden sunlight filtering through the tall pines, painting delicate patterns upon the half-finished deck. Ethan stood at the edge, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands, watching the mist lift slowly from the valley below. The new cabin, still partially built, nestled gracefully among trees whose branches whispered softly with secrets of renewal and quiet healing. Today felt different. Something subtle but significant had shifted within him, an opening, quiet but undeniable, that left Ethan feeling both vulnerable and strong in a way he hadn't expected. He took another sip of coffee, savoring the warmth as it soothed not just his body but some deeper part of himself, a fragment of the soul still cautiously relearning trust. The crunch of gravel drew his attention away from the valley, toward the driveway where Sam's familiar old truck pulled carefully up beside Elena's compact car. Ethan smiled faintly, heart warming quietly at their arrival. He had initially planned to finish this deck himself, a symbolic act of reclaiming independence, control, strength. But as days passed, Ethan had realized quietly that true recovery required more than solitary resilience. It needed openness, community, the quiet courage to let others share the burden and the joy. Sam stepped out first, stretching muscles stiff from the drive, eyes brightening warmly as he caught Ethan's gaze. Elena emerged slowly from her car, carrying a bag of pastries from the bakery they all loved. The scent of fresh bread drifted gently through the crisp mountain air, mingling softly with pine and morning dew. "Morning," Sam called cheerfully, clapping Ethan warmly on the shoulder as he approached. "Ready to put us to work?" Ethan chuckled softly, nodding as Elena reached them, her quiet smile as reassuring as it was sincere. "I hope you don't mind us barging in," she said gently. "Sam convinced me you might appreciate the help." Ethan shook his head, meeting their eyes with quiet gratitude. "Honestly, I'm glad you're here. This place, it feels right to have you both be part of it." His words hung softly in the morning air, carrying deeper meaning beyond the simple deck they planned to finish. Sam's gaze softened with understanding, while Elena's eyes grew tender, a quiet recognition of the quiet vulnerability Ethan had allowed himself to reveal. Together they carried lumber and tools from Sam's truck, spreading supplies across the open deck. Their movements quickly fell into comfortable rhythm, each task seamlessly flowing into the next, Sam measuring boards with careful precision, Elena sanding surfaces smooth and clean, Ethan aligning and securing each plank with patient attentiveness. The air filled with quiet conversation, gentle laughter, and the satisfying resonance of hammers striking nails firmly home. Ethan found himself sharing fragments of stories he'd previously kept guarded, recounting childhood memories from his grandfather's cabin. Those simple, beautiful moments of innocence before betrayal had touched him. Sam and Elena listened quietly, offering their own stories in return, moments of joy and quiet resilience, pain and recovery, weaving gently together into a shared tapestry of healing and growth. As the deck steadily took shape, Ethan felt a gentle warmth spreading steadily through him, loosening knots of residual pain, quiet doubts dissolving softly in the presence of friendship and community. The solitude he had clung to fiercely now felt incomplete without this shared space of connection, empathy, quiet understanding. By midday, the deck stood nearly complete, sturdy and beautiful beneath their careful hands. They paused together, sitting upon the fresh boards, passing pastries and cold drinks as sunlight warmed their shoulders gently. Sam stretched comfortably, glancing around with quiet satisfaction. "You know, Ethan, this place, it feels like you. Quiet, strong, resilient." Ethan smiled softly, heart swelling gently at Sam's simple yet profound observation. Elena nudged him lightly, her voice gentle yet sure. "He's right. It's beautiful, Ethan, truly. And allowing us to help. Well, that took courage, too." He nodded slowly, quietly acknowledging her truth. "For a long time, I thought healing was something I needed to do alone," Ethan admitted softly. "But maybe it was always supposed to be shared." Elena's gaze softened further, filled with quiet understanding. "We all try to protect ourselves from getting hurt again," she murmured gently. "But real strength comes when we're brave enough to let others in again, even after we've been broken." Her words lingered quietly between them, profound yet simply spoken, gently illuminating the path Ethan had chosen. This deck, built with care, patience, and quiet trust, represented far more than wood and nails. It symbolized the quiet reclamation of his heart, rebuilt not in isolation, but through openness, vulnerability, and collective strength. Late afternoons settled gently around them, shadows lengthening softly beneath the trees. Ethan stood quietly at the edge of the deck, heart calm yet alive with quiet energy. He had arrived here wounded, betrayed, guarded fiercely against further hurt, but now he stood surrounded by friendship, supported quietly by community, his soul healing gently, quietly stronger than before. "I'm glad you're both here," Ethan finally said, voice steady yet touched softly with emotion. "This cabin, it's not just mine. It's ours, a reminder that healing isn't solitary. It's shared." Sam grinned warmly, raising his glass in quiet salute. "To healing, then, and the courage to find it together." They clinked glasses softly, laughter and quiet conversation resuming easily beneath the peaceful embrace of pines and fading sunlight. Ethan watched quietly, heart full yet gently open, profoundly aware of how far he'd traveled from bitterness and betrayal, back to quiet trust and genuine connection. Later, alone on the deck beneath the star-filled sky, Ethan breathed deeply, absorbing the quiet beauty surrounding him. Scout lay quietly at his feet, steady and loyal, a silent witness to Ethan's journey from pain to healing. He closed his eyes softly, envisioning clearly the original cabin his grandfather had built, now forever lost, yet somehow still alive within him. A cabin rebuilt gently, firmly, within his mind. In this quiet sanctuary, built of trust and vulnerability, Ethan finally understood profoundly that true healing wasn't found merely in reclaiming solitude, but in reclaiming connection. It lay not in fierce independence alone, but in the courage to welcome others gently, sincerely, into the spaces once occupied by hurt. Betrayal had taught him quiet resilience. Pain had revealed his quiet strength, but love and friendship, quietly offered and gently accepted, had shown him true healing. And now, standing quietly beneath a sky vibrant with stars, Ethan knew clearly and finally that the cabin in his mind was no longer empty or guarded, but filled gently, beautifully, with quiet trust, quiet strength, and the enduring warmth of companionship, vulnerability, and love. In the quiet of evening, Ethan stood on his newly built deck, Scout resting at his feet, as twilight painted gentle purples over the silent woods. Memories no longer tasted bitter. Instead, they drifted softly like smoke above fading embers. Reminders that betrayal wounds deeply, yet healing quietly reshapes the soul. He understood now. Strength is not revenge, but the courage to rebuild, to trust again, to find peace within the echoes of pain. Ethan exhaled slowly, welcoming stillness, knowing clearly what mattered most. He had lost her, but he had finally found himself,